Toy Design Co. presents real people, real stories, your inspiration. You're watching Raven Maven. Welcome back. We're back. It's another episode of Raven Maven. I have with me Mike Toney.
Hey.
He's an illustrator and designer.
Yeah.
And we're actually shooting. This is episode 11, so I'm excited.
Very
excited to
have
you.
Yeah.
So, tell us. Let's start with what I want to start with is before your beginning.
Okay.
So, like, how did you get started, or what introduced you to illustration and the design?
So design kind of came in way later, but illustration, I think, probably right around the time I was like maybe 4 or 5 or something like that. I always had an affinity for Ninja Turtles, and I think I started kind of drawing Ninja Turtles right around then. And my dad, actually growing up, was really big into comic books. Okay. So he got me and my 4 brothers into it. And we've been collecting comic books for years. I think my dad had one of the earliest Supermans. He had a lot of stuff. I had the first series run of Todd McFarlane's Spawn for a while.
Wow.
I had a lot of comic books. I had the first Cable, and I had an early Bishop comic, and then I kind of spiraled into Image and everything else like that. But once you're collecting those comics and you have like a little taste of kind of drawing, you try to copy them and stuff like that. And so from there, I was doing that for a while. Just kind of, I wasn't really taking it seriously. I was just kind of drawing.
Yeah, as recreational.
Yeah. Exactly. And like our previous conversation, is someone who grew up kind of in the inner city. I didn't really see art being like a big avenue for me. It was something that was more of a hobby that I kind of practiced or did recreationally. And then not until like maybe a couple years ago, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, did I pick it up seriously and say, I'm going to draw every day for a minimum, 5 minutes a day if something happens. And then that just turned into like a minimum of like an hour or 2 hours a day. And then, the growth kind of came from there. But there was a huge gap where I was playing sports, and I went off to college, and I actually started a clothing company there, and I did that for several years. Brought that from the $250 in my pocket, me and my really good friend, to like being valued at like $2.2 million.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
That was a fun run. It was cool. I was actually going to be a business major.
Okay.
And I met this guy. We were the only 2 black kids in class. It's funny because we always talk about that. We were the only 2 black kids in that class.
In the business, in that program.
Yeah, in that program at Northeastern, and we sat next to each other. We were just kind of talking and stuff like that. Became good friends. Just chilling and stuff. And I was minoring in graphic design, and I found out that I kind of loved graphic design. I liked the fact that it wasn't like illustration, where it wasn't about what you liked, it was about what worked.
Right.
And there was more of a kind of science to it, and I was just like, oh man. I remember my first professor was saying something. I remember the exact moment, actually. I did this project, I turned it in, and we're all critiquing it and whatever. And he's like, why did you do this? And I was like, oh, I did it because I like it. I like it, I think it looks good. And he was like, nobody gives a fuck about what you like. Like, does it work? And I was like, and that just took me back because I never thought about it from that perspective.
Right.
And so, that idea informs almost everything that I basically do. But yeah, and then from there, I was making these characters. I made some shirts for myself, and my friend, who I'd met, he liked it, and he was just like, let me throw you this big party. It'll be great, and, it'll be good marketing for you, whatever. And we're sitting, and we're like, drinking. It's college. And as we're going and having this conversation, I was like, there's a portion of this business that he knows more than I know. And I had a mentor growing up through high school who basically taught me that you want to build a team of people who are better than you at certain aspects.
Right.
And from that point, I said, look, man, let's scrap it, and we could start back from ground zero, you and me. And he was like, word. And then from there, we just kind of, making the designs and just, handling the operational stuff, doing a lot of business strategy. We won Best Business at Northeastern for idea, like a gap funding thing. We got our first pop-up shop on Newberry in 2010. So it was like a year after really starting. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. We almost didn't go back to school. It was doing that well. And then, but both of our parents raised us and really wanted us to finish. Yeah, that was huge for my dad.
Yeah.
Like, I played sports and I could have ran track at Northeastern. And he was like, no, you have an academic, scholarship.
Right.
There's no point in playing sports at that point. He wouldn't let me play.
Not entertaining.
At all. And,
Dad was not having it.
Yeah. And island parents, so it was like.
Me too.
Yeah. It wasn't even, like I'm saying it like it was a conversation, but it was literally like, yo, they want me to run. And he was like, no. And that was it. That was the conversation.
Dad was like, no.
No, that was it. Done. And so, for them, finishing school was important. Went back and we still ran it while we were doing that. Had our second store in 2012.
Right.
Which is more of kind of a permanent situation. And did that for a while. And then what ended up really derailing us was the Boston bombing. I'm sorry if I'm just whipping through this pretty quickly, but it was like where our store was, the street was shut down for almost 2 months.
Oh, that hurt your business.
And all of our inventory was there. And the way our business was able to grow as quickly as it was is we maintained a lot of control over it. We had long conversations about whether we were going to wholesale and everything else like that.
Right.
We had connections to Karma Loop. We had connection to a lot of places.
Which I think Kanye bought. Karma Loop.
Did he?
I think he did. Well, there was conversation that I think him and
someone else. I think
Dame Dash was going to buy it, but I don't know if they ever did.
I knew that there were some talks because we knew Greg personally.
Mm-hmm.
And then we knew the people from Bodega personally.
I love Bodega.
Yeah, so Matt actually used to work there and stuff like that. But
are they still in business?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, the system they have going on, it really works for them, and it's it's an amazing experience. And really, what we learned with clothing is there's no barrier to entry. You can start a clothing company. Anybody can start a clothing company. The only real barrier or that sets people apart is branding and how you handle that experience.
Right.
And we did that very early on. I mean, even with the name and then how we decided to approach it and how we decided to bring people on.
What was the name of
the name of the company was called Animals. Mm-hmm. So it was spelled like a girl's name.
Okay.
But if you say it fast, it was animals.
Oh.
And we'd say no matter who you are, where you came from, we all abide by the same laws in nature.
Right.
We're all animals or all animals. And so, like, you're smirking. A lot of people
cute.
get that. Yeah.
I like it.
And it gets to them. And then when you see the designs and the clothing, from T-shirts to when we started getting to button-downs and jackets, everything kind of fit into that mode. Even when we had conversations about things, our first store was a collaborative effort. Even though we owned it, we allowed people to pay for space in the store. And some of them were T-shirt brands or they were clothing brands. And people were like, well, why would you do that? How would you do that? What about competition? And I think this was an interview with the Globe or the Herald or something. And we were like, well, predator and prey drink at the same watering hole and the ecosystem works.
Right.
And so you have to find that way for the ecosystem to work for everybody.
Right.
I said if someone likes a shirt from the collective, they may possibly like something over here from
us.
Animals. Exactly. So it's like finding
the right balance.
Exactly. And so it was like when you have this level of competition, then you have these problems, and there was certain things going on in Boston at the time with clothes and everything else like that. I was like, well, you have this unhealthy level of competition.
Right.
And it's not really helping anybody. I was like, so now with this collaborative effort, by myself, I know 10 people. But between the 6 of us in this store, we know 60 people.
Right.
Then we start to cross-pollinate.
Right.
But even the way we choose our words and having these conversations with people, it kept everything very animal-based, very, bringing almost like de-evolving the idea of man and the separation of that.
Right.
And then how, we were all connected. And so between the events that we would constantly have, between the people that we, if you look online, we got drops from like Travis McCoy, Kendrick Lamar. There's a video of A$AP Rocky coming to our third store, doing a signing and stuff. And this was before people were really picking up. And it was like, so we were hosting these shows for, a ton of people, before they really were picking up like that, because we liked what they were doing. We liked their message, and it was bringing people together. And that was our value proposition. That was the thing that made us different.
Unique,
in the clothing market. We can't all have like hidden stores behind a bodega or anything like that. So you gotta find the way.
Nice. So you ended that.
Yeah.
Okay. When did that end?
I would say 2013.
And that's when you really started to hone in on your drawing.
That was 2014.
2014. Okay.
So I was like, I liked Boston. I felt like I had done everything I could do there, and I wanted to kind of make a transition. So it was just really like finding the difference of what I was gonna do. Like especially when, you know, running a business, I realized that I found something that was a huge part of myself, and I didn't know if it was the clothing or it was the fact that I need to do something else. Like I constantly have to be doing something and moving forward.
Another outlet.
Exactly. And though I love design and that was great creatively, it was like I realized that I like being a creator. I like being able to not just own something, because me and Matt definitely split the ownership, you know, very evenly. It's not even about like, man, I need to have control over this or I need to whatever. It was like, I need to be able to create, and I need to be able to create on kind of my own level or my own kind of, you know, playing field and stuff. And I was sketching, you know, periodically, and I came across a video online. And the guy was like, if you want to get better at art, he's like, one of the main things you have to do is draw every day. Yeah. And he's like, even if you're just drawing some circles. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Typography too. Same thing. Same rule.
Yeah. If you're not doing it, like you lose it for sure. Because design definitely changes and it grows. So you ain't lying. There was a moment where I love type. There's a moment when I got out of it. And I got back and I was like, oh man, I got to jump into this. And there's these new type tools here. And there's other ways to kind of read and measure type and stuff like that. So, you know, it's true. It's true.
So, after you started to, I guess, hone your skills more, because it's always been there. It seemed not where you are today, but like that passion, it seems, has always been there for illustration. How did you decide that you wanted to create this Duelist project that I saw pop
up? Duelist is kind of like a secret thing. It's funny because like only people who've been following me for a very long time know about Duelist, so they kind of come into that. So Duelist was. Well,
tell everyone, because not everyone knows what Duelist is.
All right.
So.
God, man.
Without divulging.
Oh, I mean, I can tell you everything about Duelist. The odd thing is like, man, that's just all right. So Duelist is a manga that I started working on like maybe 3 years ago, and the idea of it was the same guy in that same video, in a different video, was like, if you want to do something, you have to do it. Right. And I didn't realize. I mean, I did that with the clothing company. I was like, I wanted to make something for myself.
This guy is like your Yoda.
But not even knowing. You know what I mean? Not even knowing. His name's actually Sycra Yesin on YouTube. If you go to Sycra, SYCRA. Right. This guy's an amazing artist and stuff like that. He definitely is. I definitely use a lot of FAQs from him and stuff like that when it comes to illustrating. Still, but it's funny because I saw these videos like years ago and I still remember them. But he's like, if you want to do something, then you have to actually go out and do it. Right. And Duelist was that thing. It's like, I want to make manga. I want to tell this story, and I want to inspire people the same way. So I have to start doing it. And I knew the first chapter was going to be trash. I actually knew most of the chapters were going to be trash because I knew that my art skills was trash at the time. So like that was just, you know, it is what it is. So as I'm making it, it was in hopes that each chapter and everything would get better. The story is basically follows 3 kids. They're really good friends, and they're in a high school that basically teaches this kind of realm of spirituality called dualism, right? Okay. And so it's about your inner self and controlling your inner self and so on and so forth. And when you do control that inner self, certain abilities manifest. They take 3 different disciplines in those things. And so that's kind of where it starts. The odd thing about this is if you look at my Instagram page, all the anime characters are drawn black. And that was basically established maybe like 2.5 years ago, where I was like, you know what? Some of my favorite artists never draw black people. Right. And it's unfortunate because I would love to see them draw black people. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm only going to draw black people. Yeah. And if anybody says anything about that, then I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, because I have to sit there and watch some of my favorite shows and illustrators and whatever and never get to see myself either represented or even represented correctly. It's through the lens of maybe a white person who has one black friend who, you know, lived in a particular town, and they saw black people through another lens of another lens. Right. And what I wanted to do with my art on my page was to show that black people can do and be anything in any capacity. So when you see my characters, some people always kind of ask me for a little bit more of a hip hop flair, and I'm like, not every black dude has swagger. Just, you know what I'm saying? Not every black person, not every black person has swagger, or not every black person can dance. It's true. Not every black person is athletic, but some black people are poets. Some black people are ballerinas. Some black people
nerds.
Exactly. There's some black people that just they don't fit into that system, and they are there, and they are black, and they contribute to the black community. And that to me that was important. Right. So when I have these characters, and I've been going through my progression of blackness as I was drawing, and I'll get back to that. But when you read Duelists, the main character of Duelists is actually a white guy, and that was established, or white kid, and that was established because I had found a sketchbook from when I was in high school. And as I'm sure a lot of stories out there, you can definitely look them up. A lot of black people growing up didn't draw black people. It's very hard for me to actually draw black anime characters because there's no real reference for them like that. I mean, Cowboy Bebop is great. They draw black people really, really well. But, before then, it's like, I'm not going to look at Dragon Ball Z to draw black people because that's basically Jim Crow characters.
And not Naruto.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And then, they did the Village of the Cloud.
The Village of the Cloud were like, I don't know. They look like OJ and Nicole's kids. Like, I don't know.
Well, it was like this. It was this weird mix because they didn't want to go fully black. But if you start going later in Shippuden, they actually like change the skin tone. So B's darker, like the main the Raikage, whatever, is darker and stuff. But the thing that gets me with that is like the first introduction to the black dude is like he's a rapper.
He's a rapper.
And I'm like, come on, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Like,
and then he's not even that. Yeah, he's not even that nice. And then people are like, dog, like you might just stick to ninja stuff because you're not really rapping like that. And
it's really bad.
And so like just even things like that nature. So it was pretty hard. But then growing up, I remember my dad asking me like, why don't I draw people that look like me? And I was just like, I don't know. But in my heart, I was like, nobody wants to see that shit. I don't see, these black characters on TV. Yeah.
Right.
And I was like, so I want to draw something that's going to make it. I want to draw something that people are going to see and it looks like something that's already out there and so on and so forth.
Don't you think that's kind of sad? And you could kind of see like, look how far we came. Because I think that has been the undertone conception or misconception that people have is that nobody cares about our stories or care about seeing us, but that's not true.
It's not. And
as we can see with what happened with Black Panther, like that's not the case at all.
And so I definitely want to touch back at that because then there's even so much of that's lost in my opinion.
Yeah.
But when you read Duelists, the main character is a white kid. His best friends are kind of like this Asian kid and this black dude. And the way I wrote the black guys, the black kid, is he's super smart, super talented, but he has a little bit of he's not a personable person. You know what I mean? So it's like a very different, like where you see black people on screen and always very outgoing and they're making jokes or whatever. This is a kid who's like fairly reserved. He's pretty smart and like he doesn't necessarily like people like that.
Right.
But he hangs out with them because their lockers are next to each other.
Right.
So it's odd because it's like, yo, if you don't like them, why do you hang out with them? It's like, because of course
convenient.
The kid's it's convenient. And he's slightly lonely, you know what I mean? And so like the relationship between the three of them it's very weird because the two other kids are always joking or whatever, and the third guy's always reading. He's always reading, and he's always like whatever, and they get on him for that because like, yo, you got to check in and be a friend periodically, and you see him open up a little bit, but it was like, yeah, essentially. But like he is, because he's smart, and then like they're like, well, why don't you skip a grade? He's like, but his mentality on that is like, one, don't tell me what to do. Check your voice before you talk to me. Two, like I want to do this thing because it's about learning. It's about this. It's about that. And so like. I experiment with him by making him a little bit different, even though the main character is actually a white character. But I've actually reread it recently, and I do kind of like it. I think it's not that bad. The art is whack, but I think the story of it's pretty good. But
are you close to finishing it, or?
The story of it is basically done in my head. I just have to go through and take the time out and do the rest of the chapters and stuff like that. But yeah, there is a pretty. Did you get a chance to read it?
No, I saw you talking about it on your YouTube. Yeah. So I was like, aha! So there is a project. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about it because I wanted to know, like, what are your plans for the Duelist? Like, when do you want to release it, and like really?
Well, Duelist is out right now. It's on Tapastic.
So it is out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I what I was doing originally is I was like putting out chapters like every like few months as my growth would change and stuff like that. Yeah, so I mean, you can start reading it. It's on tapastic.com,
Okay.
or I think it's tapas.io now. And there's a pretty decent twist, I think, early on that a lot of people message me over, and they're like, "What? Like, oh, that's crazy." So, like, if you follow me on Instagram and you're seeing my posts, a lot of things I deal with theology,
Right.
and I like going back to the source,
Right.
which then brings me back to what you brought up before about our story.
Right.
And there was a moment, like maybe last year, when I put out a post and I was like, I'm not drawing black people with katanas anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, I understand why people do it. It's very cool. Like, Japanese culture is cool. I love Japanese culture. Japan is one of the first places I want to go to, even before Africa, sad to say, because of how much it's inspired me, and a part of that culture has inspired me. But I said that because I was like, there are so many amazing things and stories and beautiful places and things that can be written that can come out of Africa.
African culture, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was like, if anything, I'm doing sabers, spears, whatever. I'm like, I mean,
and I noticed that change in your work. I noticed the spears, because I feel like, also as being a nerd myself, I see that a lot of Black people worshiping and idolizing Japanese culture.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there's nothing. Yeah, there's tons of cool things about. I want to go to. I have a Japanese friend. Yeah. And I'm gonna visit her. Shout out to you, Kiko. But it's like, again, I think it's very important for us to feel that way about our culture and to research and look deeper into it, because I'm pretty sure it'll be cool to us. The only reason why that is so cool to us because they're in their own homogeneous, like, they're cosm, and they're expressing themselves, just like we express ourselves, and we just need to like look into it. Like, even in the music, like by Fela Kuti, there's so much cool stuff about him. Like, he's a character in itself, and what he was doing and how he was fighting and saying his truth, you know what I'm saying? So I kind of like, I would like to see, I think it's cool that you did that, but I would like to see us kind of get away from, I don't know, like idolizing other people's cultures. I
think, and in some ways I agree with you on that. I mean, I really love Japanese culture. It's really, I mean, it's hard for me.
And don't get me wrong, like, I'm the ramen queen.
Yeah,
like, I love ramen. Like.
And I agree, like, likewise. And the tattoo I have is it's basically me, and it's battling my demons, and I got it from a dude who it's funny, I got it from a black dude who spent 2 years in Japan. Studying Japanese painting. I did the first drawing, and then he was like, "Yo, do you mind if I do a second pass?" And I was like, "Yeah, go ahead." And he did this, and I was like, "Yeah, throw mine in the garbage. Like, you can just put it in that garbage bin." And so to get this, so I mean, I love Japanese culture, and I love
the camera see that.
And I love how much it's inspired me and stuff like that. But I agree with you. I think I don't mind the admiration as long as there's not a self-loathing that is tied to that. And that's what I feel like. I mean,
and I think that happens. Yeah.
I feel like that's, we grew up making, or at least from where I was, you grew up making fun of someone, you call them an African booty scratcher or something like that. It's one of those weird things, but it was like, you don't realize how much of a self-hate that you have for yourself and your things, and then you like other things more. Right. So for me, moving away from the katana, moving away from certain parts of that Japanese culture, and really just implementing an injection of African culture. So, like, Duelists is one story, and I want to finish it because there are people who read it and they're like, "Dude, when's the next chapter coming out?" And I don't want to be one of my favorites, Yoshihiro Togashi, who does Hunter x Hunter, which is like my favorite anime manga all time top. He does
and I was just
and Yu Yu Hakusho.
Like, what are your favorite manga? Your top, like your top 3?
I mean, top 3.
Right now.
Oh, right now.
Yeah,
okay,
right now, like,
All right, so I can't say Hunter x Hunter is up there because Yoshihiro does this thing where he takes these breaks, and they're not breaks. He'll just stop doing shit for like 2 years in the middle of a chapter. It'll be a sword slash, and it's about to kill a dude, and he won't drop a chapter for 2 years. It's heartbreaking. But right now, Promised Land.
Star Wars shit.
Oh my god, it's devastating. It's so devastating. And then now he's come back and he's basically like just writing novels in each chapter. Granted, I still love the world building and how he does it. He's still really good. But as of right now, my top is can't be in a particular order.
Okay.
It's gonna be Promised Neverland, which is basically about these kids. They grow up in an orphanage, and the woman that basically loves them and everything else like that. One of the girls finally gets adopted, and she leaves her teddy bear at the farm, and they go bring it to her, and they see these demons out there, and the girl is dead in the back of a cart.
What the hell?
Now the kids that live in this place in this orphanage, they're trained every day to basically be geniuses, like a genius level intellect.
Okay.
Once they get to a certain age, they either age out or they age to a certain point where they're allowed to get adopted. And that's at like age 12, between ages of like 8 to 12. And so this girl like basically was like 9 or 10, and she had a genius level intellect, and they brought her in, and then they find her dead. So then you follow these 3 kids who basically like are figuring out the mystery of this place.
Yeah, right.
And the writing is unbelievable. Oh my god, I wait for that every week, but I have to read it first because it's extremely depressing. It's uplifting and depressing. It reminds me of the kid version a little bit of Shingeki no Kyojin, which is the Attack on Titan.
I love Attack on Titan, but Attack on Titan is quite depressing.
It is depressing. If you don't get past the first 8 episodes, boy, it's hard.
Karen's like, they're nerding out right now.
And then so there's that, and then there's Boku no Hero Academia, which is basically My Hero Academia, which everybody's getting onto. That basically took the place of Naruto and the Big Three.
I'm now finishing Naruto.
Oh, you're now finishing
the anime. Finishing up.
Okay. I mean, the anime.
I'm starting to get annoyed because like I never read the I haven't read any manga.
Oh, okay.
I've only watched animes.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. But Naruto. It's gotten to the point where they're dragging, so it's just like it's a lot of like filler episodes, just driving me crazy.
It's hard. That's what makes people get into the manga because there's no filler.
I just need to read. Just read the manga because like I'm like, this is annoying.
Yeah, and it's it's gratifying because now it's really hard after you watch so many chapters to see that there was this lonely kid who was crying on a swing.
Yeah.
To now like having the level of respect and the love and admiration.
Yeah.
And he hasn't lost any love for the village, his homies, or anything. And he's like, now that I'm in this position,
after all the betrayals.
He's like, I need to go harder because this is the thing that's gonna save what's kind of happening. And so it's, to me, I like it, the gratifying, Kishimoto, Musashi Kishimoto. One of these, there's 2 brothers. They're 2 brothers, and they both are mangakas.
Okay.
And one does he does 0 parts in Psyche number 9, and then this one does like Naruto and whatever. I always get their names mixed up, but I mean, he's a genius. I wish he would get off of his honeymoon and come back to like writing another story. But I think he killed it with Naruto. It's one of those like kind of legendary things. We'll live on for a while.
Naruto is like, I love it. And I like Castlevania.
Oh yeah, the Netflix show. Yeah. They killed that. Yeah, they did a good job with that.
That came out good. Yeah, we could talk about this all day.
Yeah. I can't even name a third one. I don't know what's the other one that
you can say
that I read. Well, I guess those are the 3. Like I read Promised Neverland, My Hero Academia, and then if Hunter x Hunter's out, I read that. Damn, there's another one, but I can't think of it. I cannot think of it right now, but there is another one I read. I read like ones periodically that are all over the place,
How long does it take you to read? Are you like a fast reader?
Yeah, for the most part, because I once you're reading like manga or you're watching anime for a while, you kind of know when there's a lot of BS.
Yeah.
So like if I see like they're talking about somebody's grandmother that's whatever, I'm like, that's irrelevant. Like I kind of speed read
I'm not reading that.
I just read it. I'm like, okay, yeah, this grandmother did this, blah 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 blah. So I mean, I go through the chapters pretty quickly, and I try to keep up weekly so that way I don't get caught in like a rung. Mm-hmm. And I've had to get back into it because I either have my time to draw or I'm doing my work. So it's like if I'm reading something or if I try to play a video game, I always feel so guilty because I'm not drawing.
Right.
You know, I'm on a quest to catch up to a couple of people.
Right.
So I know that they ain't playing games, or maybe they are, but in my mind they ain't playing games. You know, so for me, I'm like,
because they're not reading. You, like, how did you keep yourself disciplined in in honing your craft? Like, is it like, do you have a certain? There's a guy I follow. I'm on Medium. So Medium, if you guys don't know, is this really cool, like, kind of think of it kind of like a social network for like writers.
Yeah.
So like, there's a guy who does illustrate. He's an illustrator as well, and he just talks about the fact that he wakes up at 5 o'clock every day to like do like this certain thing, like work, and like how it has helped his productivity. And I was just like, yeah, I need to find that thing, like that time of day that works for me, that like I'm highly productive, and 5 a.m. is not the time. Yeah. But but like for you, like, do you have a time that is like, okay, I'm doing this every day from this time frame?
I mean,
or do you just? It's
just
wing it.
Yeah. Well, it's just for me. It's just like about doing it. Like I just need, like I have a desire to do it. So it's like, you know, I do work late at night a lot. So, you know, from like 10:30 to maybe 2 is when I like solid like work through and stuff like that. I draw every day to and from work, and that's about an hour and some change. And then, you know, it depends. Like, I actually go to the gym for my lunch period at work, but if I don't go to the gym there, and something happens, then I spend part of that time drawing. When I'm at work and I'm on like any of these corporate calls and stuff like that, and if I'm not in there with the client, or I'm not in there with some of the stakeholders, I'm sketching while I'm on the phone calls.
So you just
whenever I can,
whenever you can
is when I try to get it in. There's a couple of artists, like I was saying, and I'm trying to catch, and this is what they do, you know. Yeah. And so like, if this is not what I'm gonna do, you know, like full time per se, then I have to, you know, find other ways to kind of catch up and kind of get into that. So, you know, if I can't draw, then I'm on my phone and I'm putting together Pinterest references. I have a bunch of Pinterest boards that I go and I will refer back to. It's just I don't know what motivates me per se, or how I get to that moment, but I think it's just been I don't know. My dad.
It's a natural thing, you think?
Maybe. I can't really. I was talking to my dad because with this new job position, I became an art director, and at this at the this ad tech agency, and it's big. Okay. And I almost didn't take it, and I had a conversation with him and whatever. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do it because, you know, I'm probably going to be the youngest person in this kind of position, you know, by like 12 years. Right. You know, other people are talking about like, yeah, my kid's in school and blah, 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 blah. Like, you know, these are people much older, and so I have to. You know, I don't have a problem sitting down and having conversations with people, but it's like, am I going to be able to handle all the work? Am I going to be able to handle, you know, this and that? And I was like, it might just be better for me to just do this and allow, you know, these other things to happen. And he was like, well, he's like, do you think you can do it? I was like, I'm not sure. I was like, but I'm going to do it the best of my ability to go as hard as I can. And he was like, yo, I'll tell you, he's like, you might not be you know, 4 sons. My oldest brother right now is like the smartest of all of us. Really? Younger Cheevers, I mean, brilliant. But he's like one of these type of people, he outsmarts himself out of things. Right. And he's like, you know, like, he's like, the difference between you and Todd, he's like, Todd is smarter. He's like, but, you know, he's like, you will work hard for something. He's like, if it's between you and somebody else, that person has to be willing to die. To outwork you. To beat you. And he's like, so if anything, he's like, at the end of the day, if you fail, I know and you know that you will have worked as hard as you possibly can to do this job. Yeah. And I was like, all right. I was like, then I'll do that, and then I can do that. But I don't know where that comes from per se. I don't know when it was established. That just might be your like your makeup. You know, I think some people just naturally have that, like, these things inside of them. Like, there was a point, I think for me, especially in school, I used to have a professor, and one thing that like, stuck out to me that he would say is like, well, while you sleeping, somebody's like working harder than you. And I would always think that. So then I started to like stay up later and work
because I was like, oh, somebody's sleeping trying to take my spot. You can't have my spot.
Yeah.
So it was like, you know, I think maybe it's that natural competitiveness, you know.
Well, I like to believe that people can establish these things. Like I like to believe that like when someone's telling me about art or whatever, like, man, you're talented. I'm like, dude, I don't necessarily have a talent in this. Right. My cousin is unbelievable. I would say that he's pretty talented. He's been a great artist from the time I was a kid, and also he's put in the work. But he'll tell you like, yo, I mean, we were having a conversation. He's like, yo, your talent may not be in, he's like, art per se. He's like, but your level of creativity like comes from that, and that's what he said to me. And I was like, well, I need to match that with skill. Yeah. And the only way to gain a skill is to practice and to get there. And so when I talk to other people, like I like to think that somewhere down the line something hit me, and I was like, I need to go hard in the paint, like with your teacher, and you're just like keeping you up and stuff like that. And maybe I haven't looked back at my life to find that moment where it switched. But yeah, I mean, I don't per se know where it comes from. I'm glad I got it. Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. You know.
I'm glad you got it too, because your Instagram is quite inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love like looking at your pictures, and I'm just like, this is like so amazing, because I was like, look at all these Black people, and like, and not that it's like I'm here. Even if I don't read the caption, I'm already like imagining like the story with the person, you know, or the character. So, speaking of that and how it's inspiration for me, and I'm pretty sure it's inspiring other people, like who can you say was like giving you a lot of inspiration to do what you're doing now? As far as it comes to like, you know, illustrating these mangas and stuff.
I mean, man, going back to Yoshihiro Togashi, I mean, like it's funny because as a mangaka, like it's not like his art is popping. It's not like he's like Yusuke Murata, the guy who does. Have you watched One Punch Man? Have you seen One Punch Man?
No, I don't know that one.
Okay, One Punch Man is off the charts. It's wild. But the guy who originally wrote One Punch Man couldn't draw a lick, and he was writing it anyway. But the story was so good, it was being read by Yusuke Murata, who did Eye Shield 2021 and like a bunch of other stuff. His artwork is off the charts. This guy was gonna stop doing One Punch Man. I was like, I gotta get a career job, whatever. And Yusuke Murata was like, nah, F that. I could draw. I'll draw it. I'll redraw what you're drawing frame by frame. We'll see if we can get this done by Studio Shishio, which is the same place that does Shonen Jump and everything else.
Right.
And we'll get it popping. And now this guy who couldn't draw a lick, somebody else drew it, but his story was amazing, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what Hunter x Hunter is for me. Yoshihiro Togashi is for me. He narrates and he tells these stories so well. Like when you watch an anime or read a manga, sometimes the power-ups are absolutely ridiculous, right? When they just come from nowhere, there isn't really a basis for it. In Yu Yu Hakusho, with, you know, spirit energy and everything else like that, and Hunter x Hunter with the whole nin system and everything else, the progression of power, the progression of skill seems extremely believable. Right. And then the way he writes, it's not so much about the story as much as it is about the character and character development. Right. So anybody I've turned on to those two animes or mangas, they're like, I love the characters. I love, you know, the way Gong is not only simple, a little bit like Goku in a sense, but, you know, his he has a certain level of drive and love for things and people.
Work ethic,
but then also there's a bit of it where, you know, his innocence is also flipped a little bit. One of my favorite characters of all time is now I'm having a brain fart, is Killua Zolodek, who's from Hunter x Hunter, and his character is so complex in my opinion. I mean, he's this kid who comes from a family of assassins, but he wants to be a child. When you meet him, you see him, he's a child. Right. But very quickly, and even in a playful manner, he will kill somebody and like, I've been killing people since I was 6. So it's not very different for me. You know what I mean? But his friend has never grown up like that. His friend is gone. Like he grew up in the wild. So it's really weird thing. So they do regular kid stuff. And then it's like you're in a tournament and the dude's like, well, the tournament's to the death. And the kid's like, all right, fine. And his friend's like, no, don't do that or whatever. And then all of a sudden, in a flash, he pulls the guy's heart out of his chest. And then his friend's like, whoa. He's like, yeah, like, yo, if you ever see my dad do it, like, he doesn't even spill blood. And it was just like nothing to him. And they go back and they're skating and they're chilling. And you're like, what? And there's these moments where...
some ice cream.
Yeah. But there are these moments where, like, him and Gong, they become such good friends. And you realize how much of a heart this kid has.
Right.
But, like, he can't really explain it, or he can't really have... Gong is the type of person that he can have those conversations with. And he starts to realize that, and you realize that about him and his character, that he doesn't want anything to happen to his really good friend.
Right.
So there's moments where the script will flip, like where he'll be having a good time and something will happen to his friend, and then like his face just turns dark and the room stops, because he's like, if he wanted to, he could down like 30 or 40 people in the room. So it's just like the characters, the way they're written and twisted, and there's really this weird grayness in each of the characters. That's what inspires me to make some of these characters. Is like, you want it to
be on that type of level.
Yeah, the level of complexity. So when you tell me you can see a character and you just start thinking of stories, and I have another person thinking of another stories, another person thinking of these stories, I want people to see that complexity. A lot of my characters feel very serious, but I try to change the seriousness of their facial expressions up, because maybe the seriousness comes from pain. Maybe the seriousness comes from anguish or anxiety or from whatever. But for you to be able to take those different moments kind of from that, there's a level of complexity. Like any character that even with Duelists, when you're reading it, it seems very straightforward. And then you kind of get this twist where you're like, oh, this is what this school is. This is what's actually happening with these children. Right. And then you get the twist of each of their characters, like even with, Marcos and the difference between them is like, there's a level of complexity there that I want people to be able to see. Yeah. And I want to be able to draw that and then be able to kind of tell that story. So that's kind of, he inspires me story-wise, art-wise. I have a lot of art inspirations, and I try to combine them all. LaShawn Thomas, Saint Chase, Yusuke Murata, Kishimoto, Tito Kube, who does Bleach.
Yeah, I like Bleach too.
Yeah, for now. I don't know if you finished it yet.
Yeah, I haven't finished it.
Jesus. Yeah.
Does it get a little wonky?
He wanted to end it, and then they're like, "Dog, you're making too much money."
Yeah.
And then
now he's caught in the storm.
Yeah. So what he did was he was like, "All right, okay, I got something for y'all." So they kept doing it, and then he just started writing wild stuff, and then people were just like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "You guys are gonna stop this, or whether I'm gonna stop it or you guys are gonna stop it." So they finally found a way to end it after he was just writing off and killing certain people and just doing wild stuff, and people were just like, "Please make him stop." But yeah, I love his art style and the progression from where he started to, where Bleach kind of ended was really great. So it's a combination of those, you know? And then just trying to find myself in that mix of that as like, what am I going to do?
You think that you like see yourself? Because to me, when I look at your work, I'm like, oh, this guy is like dope. He's like up there. And then, but when I hear you, like when you talk about yourself, you're just like, yeah, I still want to get up to like these other people, and like I want to be in a certain level. Like, do you think sometimes you don't realize like your own improvement or like where you are?
Recently I've been like what did I draw? Oh, I've been doing like these kind of like American versions of Yu Yu Hakusho. So I did like a Hiei and Kurama and like a Yusuke, like what those characters would look like if they were in America. And some people were like, oh, like looking at them and them like being black, but I'm like, yo, if you actually watched Yu Yu Hakusho, like if it was in America, it would be in the hood. Because it was really like when you see Yusuke, he's like this asshole hood who like people are afraid of because he'll beat the crap out of people. And all the gangs, when they see him, they don't want to approach him dolo because they know, but there's a bunch of gangs in the area. Right. Kurama's the head of a gang, like this whole thing. So like I'm drawing as if they were in the hood, and most of them are marginalized people, so they're black. But I drew this Hiei, and I was like, damn, like this. Yeah, this looks good. Like I drew the like dark tournament Hiei, and I was like, damn, like this looks. And I had to look at it again, like, damn, like, did I draw this in a second? I'm starting to recognize that my artwork is getting better after I started doing like more anatomy based studies, more anatomy based things. But at the end of the day, I do see myself as very lowly as far as when it comes to the overall skill of artists. Yeah. You know, and I would say I'm
granted those people have been in that business or been practicing even longer than you have. So like skill skill is like something you acquire over time.
Yeah, and I think I try to be realistic with myself as far as like how good I think I am or how good I am in comparison to the industry.
Do you think you compare yourself? Do you compare yourself to what the industry standard might be, or is it more so you're just comparing like where you are now versus where you was 2 months ago? You know what I'm saying?
Some of it is that. Some of it is, you know, comparison of quality to the industry and stuff like that. You know, like there's just I take a lot of the mentality I had from track, right? Where they kind of tell you you're not supposed to look around you. You're not supposed to look around and see what other people are doing or they catch up to you. You know, you keep your eye in front of you. You put your head down, and you're basically pushing and you're running. Inevitably, in order to see, you know, when people are in front of you, you see them. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like that's one of those things where there are people in front of me running on this track, and I see them. And I see how much further they are than me. And I'm not talking about career as far as like working with certain people.
Right.
I'm talking about straight up skills, straight up ideas. You know, the way they handle their drawing of clothing, the way they handle their drawing of anatomy, their gestures, their impressions, how well they tell a story, you know, in a facial expression. And so in order for me to get better, right, is not so much comparing myself to like, man, they're so much better than me, I'm bad, blah, blah, blah. It's I'm looking at them from a technical point and I'm like
how far can I catch up?
Yeah, like I'm looking at that person running and I'm like, oh, his face is relaxed.
Right.
But he's pumping his arms.
Right.
My face is not relaxed. So I need to relax my face. And so, you know, at that point when I'm watching them on a technique basis.
Right.
How do I need to get better? What is this person doing to get better? Or how much better are their clothing than my stuff? So, you know, that ends up being a comparison. And I think most artists too, you know, we're really hard on ourselves and stuff. And, you know, we like other people's artwork. We tend to like other people's artwork more than our own.
Right.
But I try to, you know, look at people look at it from a technical standpoint, as far as like my comparison is like how to get better
I think that's smart
ways,
though to do it that way, because I think if you did it from the other's perspective where it's all just based on like how you're feeling, then that's the rabbit hole of death, because that's not productive at all. Like you're looking at it more on the analytical, like okay, technically this is where I'm at, these are areas I need to improve on, and that's stuff you can actually work on. But like your feeling, like how you emotionally feel, that could like change.
It does, and I get there sometimes. I'm like, man, like, you know, like, look at this dude. I'm like, I'm never gonna catch this guy.
Yeah.
Like, you know, this and that, and then blah blah blah, and then I'm like, then I'm just sort of
snap yourself.
I'm like, bro, like you're wasting energy being sad. Like put this energy in the pen and paper. And I'm like, I'll just draw and you know do whatever. And it's weird, man, because I get these moments. I'm like, you know, I don't know how much better I'm getting, blah blah blah. And I got a message from these two dudes, and they're like directors at Cartoon Network.
Okay.
So like now I'm doing character stuff for that.
That's cool.
And I'm like, what?
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, well,
and how did they find you?
It's social,
Instagram, yeah.
And I think you know, I was just like, man, and I almost didn't do that either, because I was like, you know, I've been very cautious about my first impression in the industry, and these two people, they work with some of my favorite creators and everything else, and I'm like, what if I make some shit and they're like, yo, this is actually kind of trash. Like maybe you're curating your Instagram, so you're just putting up your best work, and then whatever I'm making for them maybe doesn't work, or maybe I can't draw to the idea of what they're trying to say.
Right.
So far it's been good, and so far they like what I've done, and I've been surprised every time. But yeah, it's one of those things where like sometimes the outside validation comes, and it's like it doesn't matter per se what you think, is that third party perspective and how you're really helping people. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, yo, you got 30,000 followers, bro. Like some people actually like what you're doing, and like you have a responsibility now past yourself to make that stuff and to keep growing and to do the thing that you set out to do, and that really helps get out of that rabbit hole of like emotionally saying, you know, I'm never going to catch up to these people, or looking at other people.
What advice would you give to like someone who wants to pursue like a creative illustrative or art director type of position in life? They want to get to where you are. What would you tell them to like, where they need to start?
Well, damn, a lot of people are going to hate me for this. So no matter what you do or however you do it, you have to educate yourself in it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be good at something. You can't go nowhere. You can't do whatever if you're not educated in it.
Right.
That does not mean going to college.
True.
I'm not saying college is for everybody. I'm a self-taught illustrator. I did go to college for design. College can help. There are people who are there who have more experience in what you're doing, and you can learn from that experience. But college, like anything else, like any other material or tool or whatever you do, you get out of it from what you put into it,
right,
and how you decide you're going to handle it. You get some people who haven't gone to school, or, you know, I actually used to mentor and train another kid who was just talented.
Right.
He's a talented designer. Like, he literally had this innate way of putting things together, and what he needed was theory.
Okay.
And so what I would basically
like
impart onto him, is foundational theory of design.
Yeah.
Because he was making these very great, I don't want to say guesses, but these really awesome happy accidents, and he had a particular way of doing it. But design, once you get the theory, it becomes a formula.
Right.
So now you're not hoping you make something good. You put it through this, you know, this equation, and something good comes out of it.
Right.
You know, that best fits that thing. So, you know, but he didn't go to school for that. Now he lives in Cali, and he's working as a designer. And at one point he had started his own firm, and he's doing whatever. And so it's more about you know, and then he continued that education after me.
Right.
So whatever it is, however you want to start, whether you want to be a mechanic or you want to, you know, do art and work in the arts career, you have to educate yourself in whatever that field is. Once you become educated in it and you decide to practice in it, when you're good, you're able to dictate what you want to do.
Yeah.
People ask me what I want to do with my art all the time. I have friends who are influencers that are like doing a bunch of different stuff, and they're like, dude, what do you want to do with this? I'm like, I want to be as good as I can be, because at that point I can do whatever I want.
Right.
And you can, you know, and I think that's the goal, is for me to get as good as some of these people. And then when I walk into a network and I walk into a certain place and I say, hey, this is my pitch Bible.
Right.
Look at my artwork. Look at the story that I'm telling. Look at the audience that I've built. People
They
want to see this. Yeah. And then this is what I've done. And at that point, I'm not asking them to be a part of that network. I'm giving them an opportunity.
Right. Because
yeah.
I did see that you posted, people ask you all the time, like, why you haven't animated. And I was like, I'm not going to ask him that question. Yeah. So I'm not. But educate people on what it needed to create an animation series, because I think a lot of people do not know what is needed, and so they just think it's like, just like, you know, they think it takes you 10 seconds just to draw something. It might, but like that 10 seconds took you to sketch up something, that was like years of training. So there's always like a lot of things going on and behind that people don't see, and they don't understand why. It's just that it's easy to switch it on a light.
Yeah. So people are like, yo, make an anime, do this, do that. And I get that a lot. Or, yo, can you start something on Webtoons or whatever? And there are stories that I'm writing and stuff like that. Part of the reason, like, in Duelists is a practice thing, as I was saying, is like this kind of hidden thing, is like, I want to get to a certain point where I can really tell the story visually.
Right.
As well as, you know, tell it in a written manner as well as visually. And so there's that portion of the reason why I haven't, you know, really come out with a new project that I'm doing weekly per se. Secondarily, so as far as like shows and animes and stuff like that, that takes an extreme amount of work. If it takes me 2.5 hours to do a full color drawing with all the lighting and stuff like that, animating is 24 frames per second. That's if you're animating on ones. If you're animating on twos, that's 12 frames per second. A lot of people alternate in between 1, 2s, and 3s.
Wow.
So you can have anywhere between 24 frames per second, or, you know,
for one artist, that's
for 12 frames per second. That's one artist. That's 24 full color drawings times 3 hours. Now let's say I don't do all the special effects and everything else like that, and it's 2 hours or an hour and a half per one. That's still, let's say, 16 to 18 frames at 2 hours or an hour and a half a piece. That's for 1 second, right? So now we're looking at, you want an actual anime, it's 60 seconds in a minute. It's 23 minutes for a decent episode.
Jesus.
That's just on that. So that now if you're looking at production wise, and that's, you know, and that's me doing the coloring and this and that, and you get people and they drop like a 6-minute clip of something that's animated beautifully, and they're like, this took me 3 years to make. And it's like, yo, that makes sense. But for me, like, I can't
put that time.
Well, not just the time, but it's like, yo, my skill level's not there. It would be a waste for me, and it would be a disservice to everybody who follows me for me to stop and start doing this animated stuff when my skills are not at a particular height.
Yeah.
Where I'm translating that into something that's good. And that's not me like trying to be down on myself and being like, man, you can really do it. There are people who see me that they think the artwork is great.
Right.
And what I try to explain to them is like, yo, my man, it's the difference between like, are you an artist? Do you draw? And they're like, oh, no, not really. I'm like, so then your eye is a little bit different. And it's the difference between judging the climbing ability of a monkey and an elephant.
The same as tattoos.
Yeah.
Like when other tattoo artists critique other tattoo artists, they look at like the lines and everything. So like you said, it's like if you are an illustrator and you've been illustrating for like 30 years and you're at this certain level, you're gonna be able to better say whether or not something's really good or not.
Exactly. And so when I say that, I'm like, yeah, you see me now because you're an elephant, so climbing a tree is hard for you.
Right.
But when a comparison to other monkeys, and they're moving wicked fast, and you're like, oh, now I see.
Right,
and that's the difference. You know, I'm seeing that. So I know I'm not at that point where I should be taking the time out and reinvesting my energy into that. Right. And I like playing around with animations. If you've seen on my page, it's cool. And I play around with generalized figures and stuff. But the idea is to find out what my actual style is. Perfect that style to a particular degree, because there's no such thing as perfection per se. Yeah. And then I can take that and translate that into another form. So yeah, I mean, that's why it's taken me a while to do like an anime thing. And they're like, well, why not go to a network and so on and so forth, is because what I know about that now has not been airtight. So as someone who's come from starting my own business and doing a bunch of other things, is strategy is probably the second thing that if it's either my drive, then the next thing is strategy. And everything else that I've done up until this point, even the amount of followers I have, and that's media strategy. It's all a strategy that I have for certain things. So the reason why I haven't really approached that yet is because I don't have all of the knowledge that I need to know about it. Right. And first impressions are very important. When I go in, maybe they turn down my idea, but I want at the end of the day when they're like, damn, we can't do this. But if he comes back in again or does something else, or that was a really great pitch, if he has another really great idea, I want to sit down and listen to it again. Right. And so that's where I want to be. Like, trust me.
In the right position.
Exactly. Right. For everybody who's following me, trust me, like I have a plan. There's things that I want to do. And, you know, if you believed in me so far for this thing, just believe in me a little bit further for the rest of it. I think Ekoo the Keeper, I did like a whole series of a week of just posts about this one character and a bunch of them. I think that's like one of my magnum opus stories. I think if I sat down, if I was able to put a pitch Bible together and sat down with the right people, that can actually be a thing.
To come into fruition.
Yeah, and so like...
Is that because it performed really well on social media, or...?
It did well on social. However, when I was putting the things together, I had a feeling it was going to do well. Right. There's just this way deeper feeling that I'm doing with all the Ekoo stuff that just feels like a combination of everything that we were kind of been talking about today. Yeah. Even as far as like our story kind of culture thing. So, you know, most people, their things take place in, you know, Japan or certain places here, no knocking them or whatever for people who even aren't Japanese. And for me, you know, the area that it takes place in is Neo Benin. So we're not even calling it Nigeria. We're not even Benin. We're not even calling it like Nigeria. This is not like about some woman who came from Europe and then found this river and then then the country's named after that. Nah, like this is the native name. It was never colonized. And so now what I picture that in that environment is an area that wasn't colonized, but also was able to grow and develop. So think about kind of a Neo-Tokyo setting per se, where, you know, you're having obviously technological advancements and stuff like that. We're looking at like, you know, 2023 kind of Benin, right? And we'll call it Neo Benin. And so 5 districts in this city, and each district is run by what I would call an omenhene, which is an African word for like king or ruler, right? That omenhene is basically kind of like a mob boss per se. That's like the underground name for it. Every district is owned by an omenhene except for one. And this is the district that Ekoo is in. And so that is almost like the lawless zone. Yeah. Every zone and every district is run by this omenhene in a particular way and is handled in a certain way. So think about the 5 families in like Godfather or whatever. And the story takes place of this kid who's basically a pretty well-known kind of street rat kind of individual, and him and his boy and his crew, and they basically run in this kind of lawless zone. And right around the time it starts is an Omen Hene is going to be crowned in that 5th zone.
Okay.
And obviously it's like not Ekoo and his crew and everything else like that. And it's basically going to kind of bring a particular underworld law to that area. So it's not like the Wild West. And the story takes place, it starts on Ekoo's birthday, and his best friend is killed on his birthday, and his friend never shows up. And you come to find out that this guy who's being crowned the next Omen Hene of that particular area, it was the cause of his death.
Okay. And
so, you know, like this story kind of starts from there, but everything that's been embedded into that, all of the 5 families or all the 4 Omen Henes, when they meet and they gather, they wear these masks, and all the masks are influenced. If you go on my page and you see, have all different influences that, you know, cater from all around Africa, even though it's taking place in this kind of this one part, and all the masks represent them differently. So you have kind of the family, like the Black Bloods, and everything they wear is very like high color and stuff like that, like poison frogs and poison snakes. You would see they always have these very bright aesthetics and colors, and that's what they deal in. They deal in assassinations and poisons, like in their area. So all of those things have kind of relate to that. And then their specialty, but what gives them all their particular power, or how this kind of works, is in the I don't want to call it Santeria because there's the other word for it. In the you know, like kind of like Shango, Ashe, and stuff like that. Geez, what is the actual African term for it? Because I actually use it when I'm writing it down. I'm having a brain fart right now. But there's an energy. Well, there's all these like
the Orisha?
The Orishas, and this, they're all African deities or whatever. And so how the story ultimately works is that when people come together in that particular religion or whatever, a life energy called Ashe is brought together. Right. And you'll hear people say that, like Ashe and stuff like that. Yeah, and I've heard that term. Yeah, so instead of like using Nin or using Chi or using whatever, it's our African version of that. It's Ashe. And so what happens when these families come together and these gangs are created, enough life energy amongst them, Ashe is able to bring like a deity to them, which basically gives them a power or ability from that deity. Okay. And so that's how these Omen Hene are able to keep power and stay in power, is they basically have a patronage from a particular almost deity. Like a patron saint. Essentially that gives their family a particular level of ability. So for anybody who's ever seen the show K Project, it's a lot like that, where there's one king guy and all the abilities of the members in that group stem from his ability, from that king. And so it's like that. It's like their patron saint or whatever. And so Ekoo, after he commits this kind of grand thing or whatever, and his crew or whatever together, he gets the patronage of Ekoo, the Death Keeper, which is the god of death in that Oratian kind of lore. Right. And so, you know, how it works is each group has their own specialty. Each group, you know, they utilize their own weapon set and stuff like that. So you get to learn about each of these different groups. All of the things that are a part of each of these groups come from African stories and lore. So when people start to type certain things, and I want them to look up things, when they start to type certain things, they start to learn more about it. They're like, why did he name this Shango's thing? Or why did he name this thing? Or why did he name it Omaya or Oshun or this or that? Or, you know, like, why am I making some of the choices I'm making? It's because they all come from that. Exactly. And when you read all these animes or mangas or whatever, you see that they pull from a lot of these cultural things. From their culture, but they never, or even from other cultures. If you watched Fate Zero, that whole Fate series, they pull all of these. Fate Zero. They pull all from all these characters from Mesopotamia, all these other things. You never see them pull things from Africa. Yeah. And it's the most frustrating thing, because if it's the cradle of civilization, if people were started there, then that means they developed their cultures there, and then they took that show on the road, which means there's a ton of rich lore and a lot of things there that people just leave out because there's a negative connotations about Africa and African stories and Black people. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to do is to be like, okay, when, you know, I want people to know man, I have all these brain farts because all these different thoughts come to my head. I want people to know what a griot is.
Right.
I want people to understand the culture of griot and how stories are passed down, you know, by word and stuff like that, and how accurate some of these, you know, storytelling skills and stuff like that were. I want people to know about, you know, warrior women and stuff like that, and the lores and the stories and stuff like that in Africa.
Right.
I want people to know that if I reference, there's a character in Duelists who's like basically like Egyptian, she's like dark skinned or whatever, and you know, people to know that there were several pharaonic rules of women, that women can rule and pass on things in their own right, and that there were women that were considered pharaohs. They weren't even
considered, almost like they weren't women. It was like they were no, you're just a pharaoh.
Well, the thing is that pharaoh itself is a gender neutral kind of term, right? And so, you know, when other people have to quantify it from their own cultures, they have to say, well, king and queen, because that's how we understand it in the translation.
That's the Western thought process.
Yeah, I was trying not to kind of say that whole thing. That's what I said when other people.
Say it.
Well, you know, when you start from that perspective, it's like they translate it for their thing, and they're like, well, women can't be kings, but they say you have kings and queens of Egypt, but no, you just have pharaohs of Egypt. You have rulers of Egypt, and so you know she claims to be from a royal bloodline and stuff like that, and so. I want when people to look up, like, man, I want to read Ekoo the Keeper, and they look up Ekoo, and then some, you know, Orisha lore comes up, and Orisha's like, oh, this is where he got this from.
Means,
Oh, this came from Africa. Oh, this is really cool. Like when we see certain things, or certain like Amaterasu, when people heard that in Japan, they're like, what is that? And like, oh, well, that's when you look it up, and why Sasuke could do this fire thing and all this other stuff. It's like, oh, that's because that comes from the god of the sun, Amaterasu, and that's why the flame is so powerful and this and that.
And that's why they have the fire symbol as part of their clan.
Yeah,
it's all tied in together neatly.
But it's also all tied into Japanese culture and it makes people look into that stuff. And when they look into it, they learn about the culture, and then what do? Then they worship it and they get to whatever. So I want more Black people to see these characters,
so we could feel that good about our own culture.
Yeah. I mean, you have people, right? And I don't want to knock these people or whatever.
You're not. But I always feel like, why do we do that? Yeah. Like, oh, you're not. I don't want to knock. You're not knocking by just saying, I should just pop it.
Well, I mean, this is for other Black people too. Like, I don't want to knock these people, and I just feel like I have to say it as a prerequisite just so they know. But like, you got people who are making Black characters, and they're calling them like Zeus, and they're calling them this and that, which is not a problem, you know, per se, because. Like, if that's what you want to do, then that's cool, and we know other people who do that with characters. But like, you could. There are cool African names. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are cool African gods. There are cool African heroes. You know what I mean? And then some of the like African heroes have been have been basically whitewashed. That you could take those names back and reuse those names, or do whatever. So it's like when I look at that. A part of me, I'm like, your character's dope and that's cool, whatever. But there's a part of me that's really sad when I see that. Because I'm like, damn, like you A, don't know enough about your own culture. B, don't think it's cool enough to use. So instead of that, you get a Black character and you call him Caesar.
Like the series American Gods, I kind of love that whole, I don't know if you ever.
Oh, I have,
yeah. I love that part where it's like with the god Ananis. Yeah. And he's like in the slave ship with them.
Anansi.
Yeah, Anansi. Yes, and like that was like the most. That actor, he's such a great actor. Yeah, but like, Orlando Bloom. Yeah, he's like Orlando Bloom is the bomb. Like people sleep on Orlando Bloom, but like he killed that.
He definitely destroyed that. Funny.
And a lot of people don't know about. It's funny how a lot of people don't know about Anansi. Yeah, like
Yeah, well, and it's cool because he is the god of storytelling.
Exactly.
He's a god of storytelling. He's also a trickster, right?
And
that's the one thing that they don't necessarily show per se in the show, but like Anansi, go back and read Anansi Tales, or just even listen to it.
I heard my first one when I was in elementary school, but then again, I went to an all-Black elementary school, so like it was a story about like two sisters, and like they like Anansi like somehow like got them to do the author got one of the sisters to do something bad to the other sister. Yeah. And it was just like, that's the role he played, like, you know, the troublemaker.
But then also he was the first guy to steal stories from the gods and basically be able to pass them on. So that's why he was given that. You know? He's also really smart. Like in a lot of tales, they tell him it's also being really smart. He also has a son that ends up being smarter than him and outsmarts him a couple of times and stuff like that. But like, that's like cool. Like there's a lot of these African stories and stuff. Like I've used the Nunci a couple of times, and I think in Duelist I'm using him. I think the main character, the main bad guy character is a Nunci. But yeah, it is like, but that's the type of stuff. But I was using that before like American God came out. You know? Yeah, like that, because I had known about it before that, because I just got into this thing where I was like, why don't people use African lore? It's because there's not a lot out there, and a lot of people aren't using it. And I'm just like, well, if that's going to be the case, and this was before Black Panther, it was before whatever, if you go back and you look through my 3,000 plus pictures or posts or whatever, if you go back at least 2.5 years or maybe 3 years, you'll see that at that point, there was a flip, and I was just drawing a lot of black characters, and then a couple months later, maybe a year later, it was like, start using more African names, start using more African lore. Then I'm realizing like I'm drawing African characters using katana swords, and I look up African weapons. We have these beautiful bladed weapons, certain bronze weapons, and so on and so forth like that. Then there's funny weapons that are very phallic based. Yeah. And there are a lot of tribes that were like, you know, it was based on the size of their manhood, and their weapons were based off that. And that shit to me is hilarious. And I think I think it's funny for people to know. Like, it's not just a stereotype per se thing, but that was like some real shit that we valued, like, you know, as a particular tribe. And obviously, like, other tribes, like Khans and everything else like that, things that they value, obviously we evolve as a culture, but that's interesting to kind of see those things and to know those things. And then it was like the patterns and the masks and stuff like that. And then after I saw Black Panther, I was just like...
That probably was another fresh air of, like, inspiration, you know?
Oh, one, it made me unapologetic. Like before I was just like, yeah, you know, I make shit, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, this is just what I'm doing for us and the culture and whatever. And I love for people who, you know, I call them my words, my white nerds that are in there, and they're like, you know, whatever. And then after I saw Black Panther, and it just gave you this taste and this glimpse of just like an uncolonized Africa. And if you think about it, like all the minerals and all the jewels and all the whatever, all the precious everything, no real stuff, not vibranium, that is from Africa. If it wasn't
exploited right now.
if there wasn't a level of colonization, if these countries had to actually pay the government for a lot of the things that they got from Africa, it would look like a fucking...
And if a lot of our countries in Africa would like stop selling themselves out, or the people who's running the country sell out there. So a lot of them are sell out.
Yeah, I mean,
it would be nice.
Yeah, you have corrupt countries or whatever. But I think the worst part, or the thing that gets me, is like some of these countries come back from like certain forms of liberation, and yet they still owe money to their colonizers and stuff like that. They still owe whatever. And then those people, certain people, when they left, they were put into power. Right. And the same power structure was kept up from a lot of that level of corruption. I mean, people didn't like Gaddafi, but like it was not a war-torn place that it was now.
Right, it is now.
And he was talking about creating a central bank with backed on gold and all this other stuff. There's a lot of other things.
Why Gaddafi's not here.
Yeah, but there's like a lot of, you know, there's a lot of stuff like, yeah, the dude was a dictator, but there's so many different things that happen from that.
It's two sides to every story.
But when you look up Benin Kingdom,
right,
and you look up the story of Benin Kingdom, and you look up the story written by white Europeans about that country when they got there, and they were like,
oh shit.
They had city lights, they had multi-story buildings, people didn't lock their doors, they had certain levels of security. It was almost like this weird utopian place. And then, like most indigenous cultures or whatever else, they're like, oh, we're cool, so you guys are cool. Yeah. So you're invited, and you can come in, and you can do all this other stuff. And they wrecked a ton of shit, and then the country went down.
Down the crack.
And it's one of those things where it's like, that's why I wanted to call it Neo-Benin. That's why I wanted like those places to be that. Is like, if it didn't get colonized, and it was able to grow in a particular way. And black people are not perfect, and we make mistakes, and all these other things were, you know, could potentially happen. And like you said, there's a lot of corruption and stuff like that, but we have to look back at a lot of where some of those things stem from. And when we look back at the basis of some of these cultures and the basis of some of these things, when they were able to progress without that influence, yes, we have made mistakes or whatever, but they were able to progress to an insane degree. Mansa Musa, one of the richest people to ever walk the planet. Right. Was a black dude, a black Muslim guy. And so there's just a lot of stuff, like when we have time to use our own resources and our own whatever, that we can make and do amazing things that we never get a chance to get credit for, and so on and so forth. So when I saw Black Panther and I saw a Wakanda that was uncolonized and was able to grow in such a way, it reminded me a lot of Benin. And I wouldn't be surprised if when Stan Lee and what was it? Is it dude Jerry something?
Yeah, I forgot his name.
The other dude over them, I feel bad, man, because he gets left out. But when they created this, I would not be surprised if they didn't use that as
maybe one of their references.
Yeah, as a reference or whatever of this country, because they also had this wall that was supposed to be around the kingdom. Right. That was supposed to be like massive, that circled the kingdom.
Right. I remember that in history. Yeah.
And that reminds me a little bit of Wakanda and having their little shield with vibranium and everything else like that. But when I saw that, I was just like, oh my goodness, like this is what it could have been like. Like, look at the patterns and look at whatever that's been evolved and brought into modern day. And then I was just like, and then it also helped me articulate what I wanted to kind of write and do and how I wanted to do the clothing. So when you see Ekoo, like, people liked my clothing before because I used to own a clothing company. Right. But after Black Panther, the way I started integrating things, it became different. Like, I was able to, it was almost like I got the key to a map. Yeah. And I was like, oh, now this is how I understand things and where I can go with certain things. So Black Panther was massive as a inspiration to that.
So, we're going to wrap up, but like, where do you see yourself for like the end of like for 2018? What are your goals for this year?
The goals for this year is I want to start the first chapter of Ekoo, the Keeper. I think that would be really big for me to be able to do that. I've been getting a lot of commissions coming in. I've been working with a lot of people. So the two things that I want before the end of the year is I want to have at least 50,000 followers before the end of the year. I know that's going to be a big leap. But I feel like with that level of progression and stuff like that, like when I start attending cons and doing whatever, that I'll be able to create enough resonance and, whatever else around my table, and, be able to have particular conversations with people. Okay. Because of that audience growth. And then I also want to be able to have started that first chapter of Ekoo, but also built a certain level of following and respect for that. If it doesn't happen this year, I'm totally fine with it, because I know that all the other things I have is stepping up to that should be pretty good. Yeah. But, I'm a very adaptive person. Yeah. So if something else was to change and, I don't know, I got pulled onto some team with some really insane creators, I would definitely do that, because the goal is to get a peek into the industry, understand what's going on there while still working on this other thing, and then to use it for yourself. Yeah, and then to do this thing, man, and to put this thing out that when Black people turn on the screen, they're like, oh yeah, like Toonami's about to play Ekoo the Keeper. So remember we were talking about this on Raven Maven. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And just be like, yo, I'm waiting to stay up to watch this shit. Like, oh, it's so dope when you see the city and you see them pull in and whatever, and like and there's so many different aspects of the character. Like, yo, I'm that character who's the smart one. Yeah. I'm that character who's the brute. Yeah. I'm that character who's the balance. I'm that female character who demands a certain level of respect. I'm that female character who, has love for her people, but also is not to be trifled with. Like, right. I'm that, you know what I mean? Like, showing the certain strengths. Like, there's so many things I want to target with that, and try to do it with that people can relate to, and people of color. And for people who are not of color, that you can relate to the characteristics the way we have to relate to the characteristics of colors of people that don't look like us. Right. And one of the things I love about, some of my followers is I do have those white, Spanish, and Asian followers who don't care that the character is Black. Right. They love their stance, they love their weapon, or they love the story that's written about them, and they're still connected to it. And right. I feel like I want to do that. Yeah. I think that's what, by the end of 2018, I want more people to be able to see that, and I want to be known for that, for people to be like, just look past the fact that the colors are Black, the characters are Black, and see that you are like this guy, and this is what the Black community deals with. And this is still something amazing for everybody. Right. just happens to be sweeter, you know, for people of color. So
that's really all my questions.
Yeah.
But please share with the viewers where they can find you on social media.
So everything is basically Mike Toney Design. So if you go to my Instagram, it's Mike Toney Design. My Twitter is also Mike Toney Design. The only thing different is my Facebook, and my Facebook is actually it's Mike Toney, and I got it from a friend of mine who's actually, his Instagram is It's Ryan Lee.
Okay.
And he's gonna laugh about that if he sees this, but yeah, I got that from you. We had a conversation about that. But I thought that was really cool. If I could change my Instagram name, I would, but it's out there too much. So, yeah, and if you want to read Duelist,
yeah, tell them where they can find Duelist.
Sadly, it's on topos.io. And I think it's maybe 10 chapters.
Okay.
So 16
I gotta get started then.
Like that. Well, let me know what you think. If you think it's trash, message me and be like, yo, this is garbage. Because then it'll make me get better. You know what I mean? Like and if you know me, if you message me, I answer every message that's ever been sent to me on Instagram.
I can confirm that.
So yeah, so if you like, yo, this is whack or this is dope, then let me know, and it feeds the claim to continue it or to change it. So, and thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been a great experience to be able to have this conversation. Yeah, definitely.
We loved having you. Thank you. And you can follow Toya Design Co. on Instagram, Facebook, and on our website. We're also on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this episode. And thank you.